You've entered Bookstorm with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back, Bookstorm Podcast lovers and book lovers and loyal listeners in 54 countries. I am so grateful, Kristen and I, and humble to say you are now in 50 states, and I think we're over 900 cities. And you're here because the same reason that we're here, we love great fiction, we love great authors, and we have one of them with us today. We have Colleen Oakley. Colleen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
We're so happy to have you with us today to talk about the mostly true story of Tanner and Louise that Kristen and I laughed, loved. I just wanted to be in the back seat with these women on their road trip journey. But let me tell our listeners a little bit about you. We like to give a little bio because you've got a huge fan base. There may be people listening to the podcast who haven't read your books, and this is a great one to start with. So Colleen Oakley is a USA Today best-selling author. Her novels have been longlisted for the Southern Book Prize twice. She's won the French Reader Prize. Her books have been translated into more than 21 languages, optioned for film, received numerous accolades, and I'm just got to name a few. Indie Next List Pick, Library Reads Pick, Top 21 Books of 2020 by Oprah Magazine, The Today Show Best Summer Read, People Magazine Best New Book, US Weekly, Romantic Times, Library Journal, and I got to stop there. We'll never get on with the interview. Very hard-earned, I know, and very well-deserved. Congratulations. Colleen is a former magazine editor. This was intriguing. For Marie Claire and Women's Health and Fitness. Wow. She lives in Atlanta with her husband, 4 kids, and a terrier mutt named Baxter, who, by the way, we've had every kind of dog walk in on the podcast, and cat and bird and what else, Kristen? Everything, right? So that's all good. We'd love to see Baxter. So Colleen, welcome. We're thrilled to have you. We're going to dive down deep with you into this wonderful story, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate it.
Well, Colleen, we like to give the listeners a little bit of the story. So if you'll allow me, I'd just like to summarize a little bit of it, and I'd love for you to add anything at the end if you think I've left it out.
Sure.
But the mostly true story of Tanner and Louise, and again, as Chris said, we did love it. We laughed, and we've been talking about it actually for a couple of weeks. Your story features Louise, an 84-year-old woman who may or may not be wanted, and Tanner, a 21-year-old who left college after an injury and who now needs a place to live, and preferably one where she can play her video games and maybe wear her sweatpants. She's wallowing a bit. Since she has no credit or money to speak of, her options are limited. And when an elderly woman, Louise, is needing some assistance, according to her children, she takes the job, not entirely willingly. And as we learn, Louise does need a little bit of assistance. She's injured her hip. She has a couple other things going on, but she wants a caretaker even less than Tanner wants to be one. The two start off their living arrangement happily kind of ignoring each other. But then Tanner starts noticing some unusual things. Louise has this house locked up tight. There's a shed with a lock on it. And then she sees a news report where there is a suspect who kind of bears a resemblance to Louise. Things get even stranger for Tanner when in the middle of the night, 1 a.m., Louise comes bursting in and says, "Pack your bags, we're going on a trip." This is a wonderful adventure story, but these two are really on the adventure of their lives, and we loved every minute. Is there anything that you'd like to add to our summary?
Yeah, that was a great summary. I'd just like to say, this is really like Thelma and Louise. If Louise was an 84-year-old woman with a secret past, and Thelma was a 21-year-old college dropout, because I just think that's such a great touchstone for this book.
It really is. And as we're going to talk about, you really did dive into some themes that we don't often see in fiction. So if you're ready to brave the storm, I know Chris will kick us off.
Yeah, we're super excited to talk about this. Like I said, I wanted to be in the back seat for a little while with these ladies. I loved every single word. It was fun loving, adventurous, quirky, witty, and yet, Colleen, you wove real life into this fun novel. I laughed right out loud. Louise once said to Tanner this, I'm going to quote, "Enjoy your life of following the rules, my dear." Wow. What reader can't relate to this statement? We all follow rules. We follow legal rules. We follow relationship rules, traffic rules, social etiquette rules, manners. And the list goes on and on. And what fun in our wildest imaginations to take time off from this real world and go on an adventure, an unpredictable journey, and just enjoy life. And I have to ask you, as the author and the writer of this beautiful story, tell us a little bit more about these two very different women and why their breaking away from the world helped them to energize, but maybe even to find themselves again.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Tanner, she's our 21-year-old, and she has her life has thrown her an obstacle that she was not expecting. She thought she had her entire life planned out. She was playing soccer for Northwestern, and she thought she was going to go on to be a professional soccer player. And she had a career-ending injury that not only ended her soccer career, but really her time at Northwestern. And so she's really flailing, not quite sure what comes next in her life or who she is meant to be if she cannot play soccer. And then you have Louise, who's on the other end of her life at 84, who has lived quite an interesting life, which you find out about in the book. Kind of the layers of the onion get peeled back about her life. But she too, she has been a mother, she has been a grandmother, and she has been in the same house for a number of years. And so I think, even toward the end of her life, it's time for her to break free a little bit too. And then there is something that absolutely forces her to get on the road, and take Tanner with her. So yeah, they both have reason to break out of their rut. And what better way to break out of your rut than to leave, literally. You can figuratively break out of a rut if you're in a rut in life, but I think quite literally sometimes we need to leave the circumstances that we're in to get a fresh perspective.
Mm-hmm. I thought of this. I thought, it was very like a fantasy to all of us that we could escape and leave no contact. I suppose the closest thing we have to this would be our holiday, our vacation, mm-hmm. if we can even break away from that. But what you said was very wise. Without physically leaving, you can still set boundaries and distance yourself from different troubles or issues or problems or toxicity or whatever you have in your life. And that's what I loved about this book. It's fun and it's witty and it's quirky, but it's heartfelt. It really touches your heart, and it makes the reader see something of themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the biggest compliments I get about this book, because Louise was really inspired by my grandmother, and so it's almost a real personal book for me. And one of the greatest compliments I get is when people say, "Oh, I saw somebody in my life in Louise." They feel a real connection to Louise because she reminds them of a great aunt or a grandmother or a neighbor who was older. And I love that. I love hearing that my grandmother is making those connections, with all these readers.
Mm-hmm. So special.
Colleen, one of the things I loved about the story was your exploration of the relationships between adults and adult children. And I thought that was really interesting. At one point, adult daughter of Louise, Lucy, says, "I just figured mom had a right to her private life." And her sister Jules responds, "Ha, she absolutely does not. She is our mother." Which I laughed so hard because I was thinking about this. The siblings go on to learn a lot about their mom over the next several days. Why is it so hard for children, do you think, even adult ones, to believe that their parents had a full life before that they arrived, or that their parents have these outside experiences and interests and abilities that the children know nothing about, maybe?
Yeah, I love that question. And I really loved delving into that in the book because I do think it's just really part of human nature that when we're kids, we think the world revolves around us. And that means that our parents' worlds revolve around us, even if they don't all the time. And I actually remember thinking as a kid, and I said this when I spoke at my grandmother's funeral, that I remember truly believing that, my grandmother was so excited to see me every time we would visit that I think that I thought that she just kind of sat in her chair waiting for the next time for me to come again, even if it was weeks or months, right? Like
Uh-huh.
that I was the greatest thing in her life. She made me feel that way, which is such a special way to feel. Um, but I think that that's just biology. And it's not until we get older that we start to realize, oh, these people actually have lives outside of us. And I think it's a very lucky thing if you are able to live long enough. If your grandparents live long enough or your parents live long enough that you get to that age and that maturity that you can find out and question more about their lives and see them as real whole people rather than just who they are in relation to you.
Oh, yeah, that's an excellent point. As you were speaking, I was thinking about how important it is as parents to talk about our other interests, things outside of our kids as they're growing up, because maybe that'll help, I don't know, because they are self-centered. I mean, I even thought teachers didn't have a life outside of school
Oh,
when I was young.
absolutely.
And you see them out the supermarket and you're like, "Oh, what are you doing shopping?" But I think it's really important for us to impress that upon our young people, that I'm a human being as well, like you. We have a common humanity and interests and excitements and things that we want to pursue, these dreams outside of you.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. If they'll listen, they will one day.
Yeah, that's
So that's
awesome.
so true. There is a saying that says your child thinks they know more than you mostly all of their life until they hit the mid 20s and then they realize, hey, I need advice, I need help. Mom and dad did know a little something. I'm still sort of waiting for that, my kids to say that. No, I want to take a little more serious turn with the book because Tanner, our beloved Tanner, underwent a tragedy and it stopped her from her life dream. And who, as a reader, couldn't relate to that? So I was just thinking, life isn't fair. It throws obstacles and roadblocks in each of our pathways, sometimes tragedies that we realize we have no control over and we couldn't have prevented if we tried. So, what do we do next? You made the reader think about this. What do we do next? Do we crawl into a corner and stay there forever? Or do we reinvent ourselves, regroup, try something new? I felt a little bit this book was about second chances, fresh starts, adventure seeking, or how about this? Here's a lesson, just plain go for it. Just go for it. So I wondered, as the writer, what advice might Louise give to each of us today as an 84-year-old woman who has survived some difficulties in life about how to maneuver through and handle these life obstacles?
That's great. I think that Louise would say, just keep living. It's not, I think her advice would be to keep living and that it's not over until you're dead. My grandmother used to say that, like, I'm still here, it's not over till it's over. And that when you have perspective, like people who have lived through a lot have, you realize that you really can live through and survive anything. And not only that, but you can turn obstacles into opportunities. And I think that somebody as young as Tanner, she faces one major obstacle and she doesn't have the perspective to realize that life isn't actually over, that you have so many other things that you can do. And she needs somebody like Louise to guide her, and give her that advice, And yeah, so I just think turning obstacles into opportunities is the greatest advice if you can actually do that and not wallow. Sometimes you need to wallow a little bit.
For a little while. But I love
Yeah.
that your grandmother said that. I mean, this is a tribute to her. And it is true. As we get older, we think of little tidbits that our grandparents said and we remember them. And it really is a treasure. Love it.
I want to press in just a little bit on this issue of aging, because you really do tackle it in some surprising and fascinating ways. And I love that Louise describes aging as one series of indignities after another, right? I've actually heard my mom say that. So that was like a really interesting thing when I saw that. But one of the ways that you address it is you compare the very old compared to the very young, and you compare and contrast some things that I thought were fascinating. In your story, Louise's body cannot always keep up with what her mind and her heart want to do, but Tanner's can't either. And they both feel frustration. They both feel regret over dashed hopes. They both crave intimacy of some sort. They both want a fresh start. They both have these complicated relationships with their families. And I wanted to kind of see how you were thinking about these relationships between the young and the old, and the concerns of the young and the old. Are they more similar than we might have imagined?
I think they're very similar. I think, what connects us all as humans, no matter what our age, our race, our gender, is that we all want to feel loved. We all want to feel secure. We're all scared of being vulnerable. We just want to be connected to other people. And I think, that's probably a theme that I address in most of my books, no matter what the difference is between the people. But I think with somebody who's older versus somebody who's younger, the thing that's so difficult in our society is that we tend to ignore older people. They really just tend to kind of disappear from our society. We don't revere people when they get older. And in fact, we try to do everything we can to stop becoming older. All of our beauty products are called anti-aging once you hit a certain age. So I just really hope that I'm bringing to the forefront that there's so much that older people have to offer, to our society, to younger people. There's so much life advice, so much wisdom, so much experience that we can learn from them, if only we would.
Yeah, I love that. You showed us there's really no expiration date on, intimacy, desires going forward in your life with a fresh start. I mean, 84. Yeah. We have this vision of somebody, maybe in a nursing home and sitting there quietly with no thoughts going on in their head. And so that's why it was such an interesting and awesome book. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually just watched, I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch that Judy Blume documentary that just came out. And she's 83 and she talks about that too, like she has to keep reminding herself, oh, I'm 83, I'm old, because she doesn't feel that way. And I love that.
Yeah.
Isn't it true for all of us, though? I am the exact same person I was at 17. Right. I am hopefully wiser, a little smarter and more savvy, but I feel the exact same inside. And I'm glad you said that about seniors, because I have a pet peeve. It's, we all have pet peeves. And mine is for any senior that we know or in a nursing home. I hate when people speak to them like they're children. Yes. Or in a very simplistic baby way. And I know 2 seniors who have had that happen to them and just shot right back some really funny little comment, like, who do you think you're talking to? Because unlike other cultures, we don't have enough respect for our seniors. And I think that's what I think Kristen was just saying too. We love the fact that you made Louise a real, lively, energetic person filled with desires and goals and dreams, even at 83 years old. It's inspirational.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It was so important to me to do that. That was one of the North Stars I was working toward, is just creating a fully realized character who happened to be 84 years old, because I just don't think that when we see that if we see a character who's over the age of 50, particularly a woman in our movies, our books, our TV shows. Generally, she's a trope, she's a stereotype, or even a punchline. And I wanted to show just a full character with a full life and desires and hopes and dreams, just like everybody else.
And you did. And thank you for that. So before we let you go, though, we have to ask you what's on your radar? What are you working on now? Can you give us a little glimpse?
I can, just a little taste of I'm about 3/4 of the way through my next book, and it is about a couple who's been married for 19 years on the brink of divorce, and they go to eat at an isolated 5-star Michelin rated restaurant, and an underground eco-terrorist group bursts in and takes the entire restaurant hostage. And it's called Jane and Dan at the End of the World.
Awesome.
I love that. That sounds hysterical. Okay,
Thank you.
we cannot, listeners, you have got to start with this book, though, The Mostly True Story of Tanner and Louise by the very talented Colleen Oakley. And then we'll wait for this next novel to come out. And in the meantime, you're going to want to connect with her. You can find her on her website, colleenoakley.com. She's also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. And Colleen, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. We just really enjoyed this novel.
Thank you so much. You ladies are great. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Inspirational, motivational. I just loved it. I laughed, but I also thought, wow, there's some cool life lessons in there.
Oh my gosh, I did. I loved it. I was thinking about my grandma always used to say that she would look in the mirror and be like, "Who's that old lady looking back at me?" And now I understand what she meant. And it's what you were talking about. You feel in your mind that you're 19, 25, but the reality is we don't interact and deal with people with that understanding of them, right? We kind of put them into this category that's an elderly person, and all the assumptions that we have come into play. What do you think about that?
I agree. And I think we're missing out on tapping into an extraordinary resource of wisdom and knowledge. My grandfather had a little saying over his door, and it said, "Too soon old and too late smart." I thought about that forever. And I thought, yes, wisdom does come with age through all of these difficult experiences and even through tragedies and roadblocks, and is maybe even more so the difficult times than the good times. And just a great lesson on that. And then I also loved what you brought up about our kids and how they don't think that we know as much as we really know just because we're the parent. And then how about when they start to cross over, which mine are doing now because they're 30, into thinking they have to give me advice and maybe take care of me a little bit. It's cracking me up. Do you have that?
It's funny because my kids are a little bit more hands off in that respect. They're just a little bit younger, and they very much are respectful, I guess, of the way people are approaching things, and they're hesitant to jump in, whereas I'm not so much. But I will tell you that navigating adult relationships with your children when they're adults is really a whole new thing. You have to be very mindful of boundaries. They're making decisions you may not agree with. You can see where maybe that's going to be a train wreck or they're going to regret that later. Those are things, of course, you're thinking. But the reality is they're adults. They need to make their choices. And so do you. And the thing is, your decisions now have to be made a little bit more with you in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to pursue things that maybe you put off for a while you were child raising. I think that mindset is very hard for parents to make because we don't focus on that transition as much. We think about being an empty nester, but you've got to think now about your children being adults with a full life, not just, college age or newly working. They have a full life, and so should you.
Mm-hmm. I like that because just this past month, I have said to each of my kids, we are very close family. We vacation together. I would consider them as friends on a certain level, but above all else, I will always be their mother. And so I never tell them what to do. I'm probably more like your kids in that regard. I make suggestions. And just this last month, I called my son, Peter. I won't say what, but I said, Peter, I know you're going through this. I said, but I'm also your mom. I said, so I'm going to tell you, I have to give you this advice because it's not right if I don't. But whatever you do with it is your opinion. And if you take it or you leave it, it doesn't matter. I still love you the same. It's your life, not mine. And I think that's probably the hardest thing as a parent, to let go. We've got to let go. And I say all the time, I believe I raised them with the strongest foundation that I could. No parent is perfect, believe me. But then you sort of have to, like the bird in the cage, open the door and let them go. And if they fall a couple times, just like we did, well, and like Colleen said, maybe you'll be stronger. Maybe you'll be smarter. It's our only hope. Yours kids are younger. You still got a ways to go. Call me anytime. I'll talk.
They go up to their mid-20s. So I see the whole gamut, one in high school and then mid-20s. But it is interesting because even in the past year, I feel like their different perspective has really taught me some things that I never considered previously. So I guess you're never too old to learn, right? But given the generation that particular one of my kids is in, they look at what we did as examples of what they won't do. And I had to stop and think about it. Like, for example, my one son was like, well, the way that you work hard and work multiple jobs and that kind of mindset of you will do what you need to do to get the job done. He goes, I reject that, because your mental health, your enjoyment, the fullness of your life has to take precedence. And I'm not saying I just prioritize job over family or kids, but that's also a very important priority to me. Whereas to the mid-20s, they may reject that a bit and say, we believe that your mental health, your physical health are more important. Mm-hmm. They're
and
probably right.
Do you think I think COVID played a big part in that for a lot of young people, and maybe all of us, because they discovered, hey, I can work from home and I can be trusted to get this same job done. And I can take a walk at noon or at 1 and still get my job done. And what was I missing out on in life by going to the office at 6 a.m. till 8 o'clock at night? And yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's a very healthy thing. So that's a good point, Kristen. We're teaching them, but maybe there's things we can learn from them too. I really like that. So listeners, I'm just going to thank you for joining us today. We are so grateful to all of you. You know, I'm going to give a shout out to our sound engineer, Mark Carey. He's still editing in the background behind the scenes. We miss him being live with us here, but he's still in the background. I'm going to leave you with a few storm predictions to pique your interest. You can't always read ahead because Kristen and I are very excited to be receiving the advanced reader copies to a lot of these books. But you're going to see Chris Bojalian with his paperback release of The Lioness, Madeline Martin, The Keeper of Hidden Books, Bryn Turnbull, Paris Deception, Katie Quinn and Janie Chang, The Phoenix Crown, Heather Gudenkoff, The Overnight Guest, Ellie Banks, aka Macy Yates, One Little Spark, Matthew Quirk, Inside Threat, Kate White, Between Two Strangers, Nikki Ehrlich, The Measure, and Juan Gabriel Vasquez, Retrospective. Wow.
Thank you, Chris. And as Chris mentioned, we are growing every week. We are so thankful and very humbled. We ask that you can continue to share our socials. These are the kinds of discussions we think we need more of. This forum, we love it. We love talking and hearing from you. And also, we want to ask you to just stay on the radar with us. We are on BOOKSTORMPODCAST.com. We're on Facebook. We are on Instagram, Twitter, on TikTok. And of course, you can check into YouTube and search for Bookstorm and podcast. We should come right up. Until next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.